to our frequently asked questions document. We'll be expanding on that. That's already on our website that has been specifically built for our fall 2020 reopening. Also, I want to thank all of the participants in our work groups that our leadership team has been leading through the summer. They have spent countless hours on Zoom in getting together and working through how do we reopen school during this global health crisis. So that being said, we are going to go through several slides tonight and work through schedules that are planned for our remote learning. And as I said, if you have questions after we get through some of the slides, if we haven't answered them, please feel free to put the question in the chat. We probably won't be able to answer them here in this forum, but we will certainly then answer them out in a document for later on. So let's get started with our slides. So opening schools for 2020. And all of our work has really been centered around our district's values, vision, and mission statement that was adopted by our board last year. And I know that many of you who are attending participated in our creation of that values, vision, and mission. And so let's move to that next slide. There we go. So here we have what has really been the center of our work, keeping students as the priority. And even in our system prior to our closure and this pandemic, we feel that these values, vision, and mission are still what we need to look to and be our compass as we plan for reopening our schools and having our students come back. We know that we need to be supporting the whole child. We know that however our learning is occurring, it needs to be in inclusive and equitable settings, that our school community is safe and supportive, and that we are providing rigorous and challenging learning. So that being said, go ahead and move to the next slide. So we really want to acknowledge that all school days are important teaching and learning days. The setting and means for engagement may change, just as it did, but the goal of engaging students, learning, accountability, and focus on the whole child, that doesn't waver. So setting some opening school goals, we definitely said that we have to keep students as the priority. But of course, we also have to safeguard the health and safety of our students, staff, and the community. We do have a priority to return to in-person learning as soon as possible. And in that context, we are prioritizing our youngest learners, our kindergartners and our first graders, and our students with our most significant needs. We also have prioritized developing learning models that offer flexible responses to changing conditions. We have a priority of empowering staff to engage our students in a much more consistent and robust synchronous learning than we presented when we pivoted quickly in the emergency, and a goal of partnering with our parents and community in support of the whole child. So go ahead. So we developed from the beginning our continuum of learning and really likened it to a color-coded model. All of the learning goes through red, orange, yellow, and green. Red is what we're starting in, a fully remote model. But as you can see in the dial here, we have put certainly students with technology in there, but we do also know, based on information that we've received from local health authorities, that we will have the ability, even though our buildings will be closed to the public and closed to the majority of our students, we will still have staff in our buildings. We will have the ability to have individuals in our buildings by appointment to work with staff for a variety of reasons. And so red will not look like red looked in the spring, where the buildings were closed and locked down and we weren't using them. Next week, our buildings will start to open up to staff. They will be closed to public, and only by appointment will they be open. And we'll discuss all of the safety protocols that we will have in place as we reopen our buildings. Orange has become the bridge as to how do we bridge our students into that in-person learning. And yellow really becomes the majority of our students in in-person learning, and green is that aspiration of how do we get back to everyone in and school as we used to know it. I do want to make sure everyone realizes that in many ways, things will always be different. We've learned a lot during the pandemic, and a lot of it will be things that we'll have to continue to keep everyone safe and healthy. So moving forward, let's talk about our red learning. So as most of you are aware, we will open our school year in red learning, which really is remote learning for all or nearly all learners. And this is because bringing students and staff together for in-person learning in classes raises health and safety concerns that cannot, without undermining learning, be well addressed at this time. We have heard from our Seattle King County Public Health Authority that they have clearly stated that they do not see a pathway for schools in the region to open safely for in-person learning. This is echoed by Pierce County Department of Health as well, and so we are compelled to work with our local health authority as we work through our reopening plan. In red, certain students or small groups of students may enter the school building for in-person support. This will be determined by the school, the program, or the district. We will have synchronous and asynchronous instructional expectations and schedules across each of our segments, elementary, middle, and high school. A single school or multiple schools in the district may be in red, while others are not. And as part of our red learning, we are strongly encouraging our teachers to deliver remote instruction from the classrooms. Before we move on though, I would like to ask Dr. Rundle, our Assistant Sup in Learning Services, just to talk a little bit about defining synchronous and asynchronous instructional expectations, because sometimes we use these words in education and we're not always clear on exactly how we're defining that.
Thank you and good evening to everyone. Taking a look at the broadest sense of those two concepts and constructs, our synchronous learning is when we're in sync with the students and we are engaging students in live instruction. So that's when a teacher is hosting a small group or a whole class and they're in a Zoom meeting or in an online platform where they're learning as a learning community. And so much like in a traditional classroom, we think of that as mostly synchronous, where the teacher is right with the students. However, we also know that learning doesn't just occur in the classroom. It wasn't the case when we were prior to the building closure last year, and it certainly won't be the case in the future, because the asynchronous piece is the learning that takes place beyond the walls of the classroom. And the same is true online. Students may be accessing videos, they may be meeting together in groups away from their teacher or their paraprofessional, and they're still continuing with the learning, but it's asynchronous, meaning not with the direct instruction from the teacher. It's important to also remember that we are really shifting into the blended learning environment. And so we're really emphasizing learning and not the setting itself. Earlier iterations of our plans, you might recall if you've been following along, referred to the red as the red learning day. We intentionally dropped the word day because it's not about the moment in time that students are engaged, but it's really about the setting and that they're learning across multiple platforms and across multiple avenues. So you have synchronous learning and asynchronous learning that's taking place in multiple settings. Taking a look at a question that we've received quite a bit, and it's a great one, and that is, and Superintendent Klosky touched on this, but what was it that compelled us to pivot and really move our schools into a red learning model to start the school year? There are a number of examples of local, regional, and state health officials who helped to make this determination. But I really want to impress upon our community that we're listening to you and we're listening to your concerns. And we know that it's not unanimous, that not everyone feels the same, that we should be in a red learning model. But we were starting to hear from a number of community members who, as the numbers started rising again in King County and reaching the levels that they are and not regressing, there started to be great concern, and we started to hear from our students as well, who participate in a number of our groups. And I would also say, and it's not a bullet on here, but from everything we're hearing, at some point we were being told that we're going to be in remote learning during the school year. Whether we were able to open up fully and have students and staff back or not, we've been warned about this second wave. And that it's not a matter of when it's going to, or if it's going to come, it's when. And I think it's also going to benefit us by starting in a red learning model, because we're going to be able to work that out, improve upon where we left off last year, dedicate professional development for our teachers, and really launch asynchronous and synchronous online learning that are going to benefit all students. As we move then and are able to bring students back, when that time comes and we have to shift again, we will have already done it. We will have been there, and I think we will have little to no loss of instructional time making those adjustments. So we're going to continue monitoring from all these places. We'll talk about that a little bit later on this evening. But I know that it was not an easy decision for our superintendent. I know our school board has been listening astutely to everyone, but we really feel that this is in the best interest of our students, our staff, and the community at large.
So as we've been planning, we know that staff professional development is going to be absolutely essential as we prepare for red learning. And so we have already begun this. We've already had many staff participate in a variety of different learning opportunities, of course, all online, as we work to really refine our red learning model moving forward. Fred, I don't know if you or Director Prescott wants to just go through these.
That'd be great. Director Prescott, you want to jump in and talk a little more about this?
Sure. So the good news is we have so many teachers who are hungry to learn and grow and improve on what was offered last spring. We've got over 100 educators currently enrolled in courses online right now as they're becoming available. And so we've got teachers in the Global Online Academy. We've got 48 people in the Harvard Graduate School of Education course on online learning, and many other courses as we go. Additionally, we've established common expectations for a learning management system. And I know one of the questions that popped up in our chat was, is there going to be a consistent platform? Yes, by grade levels, we're going to have consistent platforms with expectations that have been established by the Learning Forward teams, supported by the administration and teachers. And there's going to be expected training provided for all teachers in the specific platform so that there is consistency, because we heard loud and clear that that was a point of frustration for both students and families supporting at home. Additionally, we've extended the opportunities for staff to be able to engage in professional development, and we typically would be beginning the learning 3 or 4 days before school starts. This year, we've pushed it back several weeks to allow more time to learn and digest and practice and hone skills. So we're really excited about the opportunities. We are working for consistency and clear expectations to support our students in their learning. As we've gone along, we've asked for parental input, student input, and several staff surveys, figuring out what staff need as tools to be able to leverage learning as best they can in a remote environment.
Great. And so next we're going to talk about the red learning schedules. We know that this was something that we heard a lot about in the spring. We got a lot of feedback on, and so this had been the initial and most important work that our Learning Forward groups have done. They are available on the website, and we're going to ask each of our teams to give an overview of the schedule as it has been created. So let's start with the elementary, and whoever is driving the slide deck, I believe the link should take you to the schedule. So either Mr. Hoffman or Principal Batliner Gillette, if you want to tag team this.
Sure.
I think that's fine. Go ahead, Amy.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being on this call with us. As was referenced by some of our learning services members, we've worked as part of our Learning Forward team to develop this with a lot of input from various sources to try to create what we believe is a solid and robust opportunity for student learning during this RED version of remote online learning. So our RED learning model is built around instructional blocks. So if you could scroll that up just slightly there, we have school starting for all of our learners at 9:15, which is not dissimilar from what we do when we're in the classroom. And all of our students would be online at the time for morning announcements, a brief class meeting, something reflecting those morning circles and opportunities to connect with one another in the classroom for that first 15 minutes of the day. After that, we've got 3 instructional blocks, each an hour in length, and each site will determine what the content area is for those blocks, much like they do now for a school-wide master schedule. And the reason that we want to make sure that we've got some consistency by grade level is both to support families in having that predictability of knowing, you know, at 9:30 my child is going to have literacy instruction or math instruction or whatever it is, but also so that we can be strategic with the support services that we provide for our learners who need them. So for English language learners or our learning support program, students with IEP goals, those sorts of things. So we want to be strategic and predictable so that we can meet our students where they are. The idea within our instructional blocks, though it's an hour each, during which time the teachers will all be online, is that within that hour of the instructional block, students may be doing different things. So they may all come together at the start of the block or at some portion of the block to do a mini lesson. And then much like we do in the classroom, we would then have the capacity to use breakout rooms or offline practice times during that block where kids would be directed to engage in different types of learning. So we could use breakout rooms to provide differentiated small group instruction. Some students will go do independent practice or application offline and then return later to the group. But the idea would be that the learning would be focused on the identified content area within that instructional block. So we have breaks between those instructional blocks, 9:30 to 10:30, then a break, 10:45 to 11:45, and then a lunch period. Following the lunch period, we've designated a section of time for conferring and family support. So during this time, it might look a little different for families based on what they need, but this could be opportunities for regular scheduled contact between teacher and family. It could be an opportunity for a teacher and a student and a parent to touch base to provide a little extra support. But the intent is that it be flexible, but also a guaranteed opportunity for those homeschool connections. And then we'd have our final instructional block from 12:45 to 1:45 for the classroom teachers. Following that, there is another break. And then the 2 to 3:45 period has some flexibility in terms of what would happen for each child. So referring back to Dr. Rundle's discussion of synchronous and asynchronous, those 3 instructional blocks are those synchronous times that are scheduled where teacher and student will have a plan to come together. And then the time in the afternoon is a little bit of a combination. We know that learning requires doing, so they may have heard from the teacher earlier in the day in those instructional blocks, and then in the afternoon there may be something for them to be practicing or applying or engaging with asynchronously. There is also, if we scroll down a little bit further, our current plan right now is looking at some opportunity for some specialist learning. So this is a half hour once a day that would be an opportunity potentially for kids to engage in some of that content. If we scroll back up a little bit, Other thing that I wanted to make sure that we talked about a little bit further, sorry, all the way up to the instructional blocks, is thinking about making sure that infused into each of those are both the academic content and those opportunities to build connections, to have kids talk to each other, to have relationships being built through those small groups and those whole group structures. And David, is there anything that I missed that you wanted to layer on there as our big overview?
Very well done, Amy. I would just add that there has been some concern that students would be in front of their screens for 3 straight hours. And as Amy explained, there are 3 instructional blocks, but in each case, we work sort of what's called a workshop model, where the teacher delivers a 15, 20-minute mini lesson, and then we go to breakout rooms, independent practice, small group work. So no, your child will not be staring at the screen for 3 straight hours. And I think you covered it all, so good job.
Great, thank you, elementary folks. Now let's have our middle school. I believe Erin Miller is going to take the lead on this. Talk us through our middle school red learning schedule.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having us tonight. If we can make that a little bit larger so my eyes can see that. Our learning day is based on some premises that we heard from our community in the spring, and that was around consistency and around the desire and need for instructional blocks. So time where students and teachers are working together with the content. So similar to the elementaries, you'll see we have 3 instructional blocks per day of required attendance for students. So we have our school starts at 8:35 and goes till 3 o'clock. So we have a long school day. In the morning, you'll see on Monday mornings that kids are seeing all of their classes for a short amount of time to set up the week, talk about resources online, talk about expectations for the week, do some of that social emotional learning, community building. And then we really get into our instructional blocks Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in the morning. You see there are 55 minutes of time with a nice break in between for movement for students, but also we really found some value in teachers connecting with students at the end of periods. So we extended the time a little bit of our break in between. You'll see we have a lunch time. It's a lunch/student activity time. We really want students after 3 hours being on a computer to have time to get some movement in. Obviously eat their lunch, but get some movement in, whether it's something they're doing around the house or going outside for a run. We want that time to be there, maybe get online with some of their friends and talk if they can't see them in person. In the afternoon, we get in more of that asynchronous learning that we found to be beneficial in addition to the synchronous part in the morning. You'll see right away, we start our afternoon with student office hours, so teachers will be available to get help from students. We understand that students in the learning process need help from different teachers at certain parts of time. So some will have questions right away before they get into their work. And so right away, you'll have student office hours. It says optional for most students. There might be some students who are asked to attend an office hour, either for remediation and or extension of the activities that are happening during that synchronous learning block in the morning. From 1:15 to 2:30, that's our big student work time. And we understand that some kids will take longer than that for their student work. But it's time where we want them to be working on the content. So they will be having asynchronous learning tasks that are assigned by each teacher in all 6 of their classes throughout the week. There'll also be support available for learners, either through their special education program as needed, ELL, English Language Learner Support. We also have paraprofessionals available to support students during those times. So it's a work time, but also with support as needed for kids. We also, I want to highlight on Friday afternoons, we've implemented something called student services time, or student seminars time, excuse me, where we can do some more extra social emotional work. We can have executive functioning workshops if we need to do celebrations and or presentations such as Martin Luther King Day, Veterans Day, things like that. That will happen there as well. And then finally, you'll see from 2:30 to 3 at the end of the day is a second set of office hours We understand that kids, after completing their work or in the middle of their process of completing their work, might need to have some additional questions. So teachers will be available for that time for students to come and get some support, obviously via Zoom, in order to either solidify some of their learning or if they have questions. So a couple other things, we've really talked with our staff about utilizing some of that asynchronous time for the flipped classroom model, where they're doing some of the learning during the asynchronous time and then the application process during the synchronous opportunities. So we're excited about the model. We think it's going to be a good model for our kids in this unforeseen and challenging environment.
Thank you, Aaron. And lastly now, let's talk about our high school read learning model. Mr. Kelly, our new MIHS principal.
Hi, how are you guys doing tonight? Thank you so much for allowing me to share this. Our Learn Forward team has worked for the last several weeks to develop a model which addresses several of the community concerns and the feedback and ideas that our faculty and staff have had. We wanted to increase the live instructional time and the direct connectivity students have with one another and their teacher. We also are working toward an increased consistency in both the platform that we're using and the way that instruction is delivered. And then also to make sure that we have quality virtual lessons established, which is an idea beyond the basic schedule. The basic schedule, as you look at it, you can interpret this at first. I'd like to break it down with, if you look at the yellow, the blue, and the purple time, those are times in which there will be a teacher live and present working with students. That's about 21 and a half hours total, broken down into 15 and a half hours of direct instructional time, and I want to define that a little further. Also with 5.5 hours of basically office hours, as I think Aaron was sharing a minute ago, but it's time where teachers are available for support of students and their learning. And then last but not least, an hour of Islander hour on Fridays, because we want to make sure that we support the organization, executive functioning skills of students. We have them connected with a smaller group of students with whom they will stay with well beyond this time and through their 4 years, and that they have a trusted adult that they can connect with each week beyond their rotation of regular teachers. As we look at the week, the green time or targeted student support are for students that are struggling. Teachers, parents, or students have identified that there is a need, and we're working very directly with those students virtually. The yellow time on Monday, so all morning, teachers will be going through a very brief synopsis of the week, an overview, maybe a couple of key concepts that they'll be working on, and helping students organize their work through the week. They will then have office hours. They will have meeting collaboration time, I apologize. They will have that to work with one another. And I actually misspoke, it's not 5.5 hours, it's 2 hours and 45 minutes of direct office hours. 2 hours and 45 minutes of that will be for teachers to work together and to plan quality lessons. Thank you for that, and I apologize for that erroneous statement. The next would be, we go through a Tuesday, Thursday rotation with periods 1, 3, 5, and 7 for an hour each on Tuesday, Thursday. There is a longer break, as you'll notice, of 20 minutes, 15 minutes, because we want to make sure students are not just seated the whole time, hour after hour, and the teachers have a chance to change and frame, because they're going to be changing subjects sometimes on the fly very quickly. You'll notice that on Friday morning, we do have that Islander hour time built in every week. And another aspect that I wanted to make sure is shared is that teachers will be posting their agendas for the next week on Friday afternoon at the latest. That goes beyond the broad overviews, but specifically what lessons, dates, and times things will be due, and we'll be working on them in class during the week. And I think that is a fairly significant touch point on it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Just for all of those who are watching and listening, these schedules are on our website, so you can take a look. I know they were small and probably hard to see in this setting. And this presentation, these slides, will also be available on our fall reopening website later today. So moving on, we're going to talk about a little bit about attendance and grades, because these are things that will be consistent as we move through the different learning, red, orange, yellow, and green. So attendance, yes, our students will be expected to be present and engaged in the scheduled learning opportunities, both synchronously and asynchronously and in person if it's scheduled for them. Attendance will be daily in the elementary, just as it is when we are fully in our buildings, and the same in middle and high school. It will be by periods. So we will be taking attendance, but we are really trying to focus on that engagement piece, because we know that those two concepts are really very, very different. And just to assure parents that attendance during those block times when teachers are to be available, those will be also for teachers as well. So if a teacher cannot be there for illness or whatever reason, we will be working through how that will be covered by others in our system to make sure that students still have access to the learning. And let's go to the next slide. And Fred, could you talk a little bit about grading?
Sure. Grading has long been debated and argued in education, at least certainly as long as I've been in the profession, and I think it goes back much further than that. What we did in the spring with regards to the do no harm and the sudden move to online education, those policies were only good for the spring of 2020. So the students will continue to engage and learn, earning an A or an incomplete at our secondary levels. That practice we will sunset and welcome in a new time and a new era in the way that we'll be assessing students. Our elementaries have long been on a standards-based grading system, and that's not going to change. We'll return to that previous practice. We had teachers who were exploring and then in the midst of some action research at our middle school with standards-based grading, and I know some of that's going to continue. Other courses will go back to the letter grading, and at our high school, we'll be returning to some of those previous policies and practices as well. With that being said, I would definitely say we learned so much about the emphasis that we all need to have, that it's really about the student learning at the end of the day, and it's not necessarily about the grades. And I was just in a conversation this week with Principal Kelly. We were exploring and talking about the notion of an F versus an incomplete. And I know that our Learning Forward teams at all three levels continue to have conversations about grading, especially in an upcoming year where our students are likely to engage in multiple learning settings, everywhere from, as we start with remote, to hopefully back in person at some point. And we have to take into account that we're not here to penalize students for the circumstances that they find themselves in, but rather to provide them with feedback about their learning progression, how they're making progress, and engaging in the classroom. So we will continue to adjust this, but our grading next year is going to look more similar to how it did in the past than it did in the spring when we abruptly moved to the online model.
So now moving forward to Orange Learning, and what does this Orange Learning model look like? I know that many of you have heard about hybrid models where students are 50% of the students are in the building and 50% are not. And there are many districts that are exploring this. As we looked at a hybrid model with 50% in, the understanding would be that a teacher is now teaching 4 or 5 days of the week, and a student only gets 2 days, and then are assigned to basically independent learning, maybe some asynchronous, but it would be very difficult because a teacher is teaching the students in front of them. So as we came to the realization that that is going to be less instructional time for our students, we began to talk about really orange learning. How do we start to bring students back into our buildings in smaller groups for in-person teaching and learning, of course, following all of the health procedures and protocols that we are going to be required to have in place. Students may be in person for part of a day, part of a week. It will be based on the needs and services and supports for individual students. And across the system, some students may be designated as being in orange, while others could be in red and yellow. We really want flexibility to meet the needs of individual students as well as groups of students. Next slide for orange learning.
One of the
Go ahead, Fred.
Okay. One of the questions, and I've seen it come up as I've been trying to catch glimpses of the chat, is our community really interested in what it looks like behind the scenes as we're making decisions to move from one learning setting to another. And so, as you saw in Superintendent Koloski's notice to the community last week, we're choosing to look at the school year kind of in 3-week chunks or intervals. We know that there are some communities or districts that have made decisions to announce that they are already committed to a full quarter, even trimester of online or remote learning. We felt that while making it a week-to-week proposition was too short, that committing to a full grading period was too long. And so what Superintendent Koloski announced is that we'd be looking at 3 weeks. And in that first week, we are committed to whatever learning model that we've chosen for the district. In the second week, we start looking at attendance data. We start talking to our partners with King County, Seattle Department of Health. We're talking to our school nurses. We're listening to our community. And we're starting to think about what is going on in and around the community and whether or not we're going to be able to make a change. In the third week, then, we would be making an announcement by the middle of the week, notifying our community, our teachers, our students, if we're going to extend for another 3 weeks, or whether or not we're going to start a transition plan to move either the whole district or certain grade levels or certain programs into a different learning model. It will be very thoughtful. It will include a lot of input from stakeholders, and I guarantee you we're already anticipating these are not going to be easy decisions. What they will be are taking into account the health, safety, and overall educational opportunity for all of our students. So we will be looking at this right from the start of the school year. When we come back, we'll launch into these 3-week phases. What we didn't want to do was set up the unnecessary anxiety for families, for teachers, for students, wondering constantly, are we going to start next year or next week? Are we not starting next week? We know people are already rattled by this pandemic. And to create further uncertainty by sudden changes is something that we want to avoid. With that being said, as we start progressing and hopefully we get into that yellow and red, or excuse me, that yellow and green learning eventually, it is possible that Superintendent Koloski or the governor or others may have to make that decision to have us regress based on circumstances in and around the community. Our hope, as the arrows show, is that we're going to move in one direction. But if we've learned something from this pandemic, nothing is certain and nothing is linear. But the 3-week strategy, that's what we're going to go with to try to be as responsive and responsible as possible.
And just to add on to that a little bit, we will be working very closely with our local Department of Health. And we have weekly meetings with them now in regional meetings with superintendents and our King County Public Health. We also work with Pierce County and their Department of Health as well. They are looking closely and advising us on transmission rates. You can see their data dashboard on the King County Public Health. We are also starting to hear, it is not in place yet, but that there is potential from Department of Health, Washington at the state level, along with the governor, looking at some metrics that will be guidance or recommendations to school districts as to when they can move into more in-person from a remote learning. We don't have those yet, but this week in 2 different meetings that I was in, that was discussed as certainly something that is at the highest level in the governor's office in looking at how do we help schools who are education experts, not health and epidemiologists. And so that's why we really rely on our local health department. And actually the guidance that also has come through OSPI, they have some requirements in there that we have to work through. So as we move into yellow learning, we talk about precautions, and we're going to go through the health and safety precautions here in some future slides. But yellow means with relaxed precautions, so we're able to bring more students into our classrooms. All or nearly all students and staff return for in-person learning. Right now, with the requirement of a 6-foot perimeter for students, we have done the analysis of that, and that allows us on average of 16 students in each of our classrooms. And as we have set a priority of bringing our youngest students back, we will be staffing our K and our ones at that 16 number, so that when we are able to, based on information from Department of Health, we're able to bring those students into our buildings with that 6-foot perimeter. It will look very different for our youngest learners, but we've heard loud and clear from our parents that the remote setting is very difficult. Not going to say that the in-person with everyone having to wear masks and being 6 foot apart isn't also going to be very difficult and different and challenging, but we are doing what we can to bring our students in. In yellow learning, we will be very much how we were when we were in the pandemic. We were starting to close our buildings to visitors. We were giving very limited access. Before and after school activities were extremely limited so that we could clean our buildings. Things like off-campus field trips were canceled. Travel was only considered on a very rare and case-by-case basis. So in yellow learning, these would be all the kinds of expectations that would occur. So next we move to what would be green. Fred, I'll let you take this one this time.
All right. Green is where we hope that we can all get to. I know that there are some who are skeptical that we would be able to get to a green learning phase this year. We are optimists. We're in the business of students and kids and children and education, and we would like nothing more than to be able to come back and have our staff and our students back in the schools learning together as community members, as colleagues, as peers. And so if we're able to do that, we will be at a place where many of the safety precautions that are in place will be relaxed. It doesn't mean that we will automatically be able to reinstate every single school activity right away. We may not be able to bring back all of the assemblies that we want. We may not be able to travel off campus, but we think we'll be able to take advantage of some of those. And so we're very much hoping that our community and our region can become safer and healthier and in a place where this is possible for our schools on Mercer Island, as well as our entire school system here in Washington. So we're holding out hope that that's going to happen this year. We're going to do our part as a school district and a community to usher in that day and make our way towards green learning.
But we did hear loud and clear at the beginning of the pandemic and throughout, there are families in our community who are not willing to send their students back to in-person learning. And so over the summer, if we could move to the next slide, our Learning Services Department worked on a separate model that is a strictly online model. It is different than our Red Learning. And Fred's just going to give a couple of brief points about what our MI Online is going to be about.
Thank you, and Director Prescott, jump in as well. The community hopefully received our letter yesterday that Jamie Prescott and I authored to provide some information about what we're calling My Online. The first thing that I want to make very, very clear and help everyone out is that My Online is not the same as Red Learning. And we've introduced this other color, this purple, completely outside of the color scheme here, to indicate that My Online is really kind of like the 7th school in our district. We're thinking of this as a much more online school where students can still be part of the Mercer Island School District, but they'd be taking classes either full-time or part-time online. We will have more information on this coming forward, but a couple things just to point out about this learning model. We've had students at our middle school, but mostly at our high school, for many years who have been accessing courses through some of our third-party partners, such as Fuel, Apex Learning, Spokane Virtual. We're adding a company called Edgenuity this year to our list of outside partners. And mostly these have been students who were taking courses that either weren't available in our Mercer Island course catalog. They were perhaps catching up on lost credits or missed credits. They might be taking credit recovery. There's a number of reasons why a student would take an online class. We've been fortunate because not only have those students had their online teacher through one of these third-party providers, but we've also supported them with Mercer Island staff. As we started to see the realization that some families may be looking at the pandemic through the lens of not being able for their children to come back at all until there's a vaccine or until it is abundantly clear that there is not great risk to their children, we started thinking about those students and not wanting to lose them out of the district. And so Jamie worked hard with the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction to move our district from being able to be basically just a high school only option to a K-12 option. We're really encouraging all of our families who aren't sure whether or not the online option is best for them to start the school year in the Red Learning model. You're going to be with Mercer Island staff members. You're going to be with our teachers. You've seen the commitment with our schedules, our commitment to professional development. We know that there were some things we did well in the spring, but there are many areas where we did not, and that we want to continue to grow and improve as a system. And so we're encouraging our families to take advantage of starting in a red model. If we make the change to yellow and you have a child at home who is immune compromised or there's some other factors, we can look at moving to My Online later on in the school year on a case-by-case basis. And so when you're choosing My Online, I also want it to be clear that students don't necessarily choose that in large pockets or in large groups. And therefore, we may be contracting with one of our partners. And so that's not a guarantee that a Mercer Island School District teacher will be teaching the My Online classes. In some cases, it might work out, but in many cases, it may not. And so we'll be working with individual families. We'll be coming out with more answers to many of the great questions we're already receiving. But if I could offer some advice as a parent myself with a middle schooler, a high schooler, and an elementary child of my own at home, starting off in the Red Learning model and taking advantage of the excellent teachers that we have at the Mercer Island School District in the Red is where I would steer people. And then we can talk about the My Online as an option for learners throughout. So more to come on that, but we wanted to address that because we know that it's on the minds of our families.
And I think it's really important for people to know that My Online is much more of an asynchronous versus a synchronous live instruction daily model. But we wanted to make sure that we had something in place for families who desired that. So health and safety. Saw lots of questions popping up about this. Our maintenance and operations team has been working on this. We have a health and safety work group that our nurses are supporting, as well as our custodians and our facilities group. So what is in place? Air filtration. We have already done the analysis that we can pump lots of outside fresh air into our buildings, and we will be able to do that as much as possible. We've also ordered replacement filters so that we can replace them frequently. We do also have, as many people have asked, what about outdoor spaces? We will be using our outdoor spaces as much as possible. We will be scheduling them for perhaps different use than we've normally used them for, because we do know that being outdoors, what the latest information tells us, is a safer place to be. In the spring, you heard us talk about these Clorox 360 machines that we were bringing in nightly to our campuses. We have been able to purchase more of these, so we now have one to service every single building. We use Virex sprays and wipes. We were using those in the spring, and those are still considered the best cleaners for us to be using. We have thermometers that will be for taking temperatures. We have personal protective equipment that is in stock and ordered and in our buildings ready to go. We know that masks are required for everyone as they enter our buildings. Cloth and procedure masks are already here. Gloves, some of the clear visors are going to be available. We do have cloth masks available upon request for students and staff. I know that a lot of families have been getting on social media and recommending different masks so that your child feels comfortable with it when they come in. Same for adults. We're all trying out which ones are working best for us as we're working through this, given that we should all be wearing masks when we're around others at all. We will have additional hand sanitizing stations in our hallways and our classrooms. And we're also going to be reminding and teaching all over again hygiene. So hygiene practices, how to wash your hands. We've got posters that we're going to put in around all of our sinks to remind everyone about the best way to wash their hands. We're going to have signage reminding everyone that masks are required to come into our buildings during the day. We're going to have reminders about physical distancing, just like you see if you go out in the community now. If there's a place where someone is waiting in line, we'll have markers on the floor and in our different spaces so that we're reminding everyone to keep that physical distance. We have a second slide for health and safety because there are so many things. We have worked on, as I said earlier, the 6-foot perimeter. There was a lot of discussion around this when this document first came out from OSPI for Washington reopening schools. They were adamant that it's a 6-foot seat-to-seat distance. So we are working through this. We know we have a lot of shared tables that we will have to adjust and use differently. As we start to bring more back into our buildings, as we get to a yellow phase and we're having more students and staff in our buildings, we will be implementing one-way hallways, which will take longer for movement, but it does lessen the interactions that people will be having. Students and staff will have dedicated entrance and exits. Again, as we bring in more people, we know we want to limit the large groups, and so we'll be doing everything we can to avoid that by, again, saying, here's your specific entrance to be coming in. For our elementary, when they are in person, we are going to be, as we are for all of our students, doing our very best to keep them in cohorts. This is a recommendation from Department of Health, where a group of students stays together, limited adults that are coming in to work with them as well. This supports public health when we work with them if we do have to do any contact tracing. Students will be eating their lunches most likely in the classroom so that the physical distancing can still occur. And yes, we will still be providing lunch even when we are in red learning. We had a little note about that and I forgot to mention it earlier. We will have lunches that will be able to be ordered and paid for online and then picked up at different locations around the island. So watch for more information on that. Our middle school and high school in-person lunches will also follow all the recommendation for social distancing, reminding kids that the mask comes off while you're eating, but then it has to go right back on. We know that we have to be very cognizant of gathering places. This is particularly important for adults So staff rooms and copy rooms will need to be clearly signed and monitored so that we stay in compliance with physical distancing. Yes, there will be daily health screenings, and attestations is how OSPI is informed us that we can do these health screenings. We are working in a consortium in our region where this will be done online, where parents will need to go in and do an attestation for each of their children before their child is able to come on campus, and then it will interface with our student information system, Skyward, so the adult that is working with that student will be able to see that that attestation was done. And we will have the same process for any staff that are coming into the building also, as well as any visitors. Our buildings will be open by appointment only for anyone who is non-staff. And of course, we will continue to use Zoom meetings. It's always an option. It's a great option because we want to really limit those large groups as they occur. So some other considerations that we have been working through as we've been planning for our reopening. Fred, do you want to take these?
Sure. There are a number of other considerations. Obviously, they can't get to all of them today, but certainly as we are weighing the health and safety guidelines that are being offered to us and suggested to us, we're thinking about, who's lowest risk for exposure. We're thinking about the job functions within our school district of employees and bringing employees back. We're considering that physical distancing. We were hoping that 6 foot of physical distance that we needed to maintain in our classrooms would be reduced to 3 feet. The King County Department of Health has been very clear that they will not relax that. And that has been a tremendous barrier to not just our school district, but all school districts, because it becomes down to staffing considerations at that point, as well as the space in the classrooms. So we're going to continue to monitor that. If they can start relaxing some of those 6 feet requirements and find that can still keep students and staff safe and healthy, we will welcome that, because that means we're going to be able to start moving more students back. We also know that we're impacted. We're not a school district who's in a vacuum. We are right in the midst, obviously, of the Seattle metropolitan area. When one school district makes a decision, there's a ripple effect. We see this oftentimes with snow days and weather and inclement weather, where if some of the larger districts around us are calling snow days, we know that's going to impact our staff, and we can't ignore the fact that if we don't have enough staff able to come to work, we're not able to open up our schools either. And so we always have to keep in mind that we're not just our own independent operating system. And then, as I was saying, there's just the overall challenges of the pandemic and some of the requirements. These are challenges. They are barriers, but they are things that we're trying to find ways around and navigating as an entire school district. We're continuing to work closely with our Mercer Island Education Association, MIEA, the Teachers and Classified and Transportation Union, to find solutions to some of these challenges. But our entire plan is part of the entire collective bargaining process, and the intent is to make sure that everyone is safe and healthy, and that the students are our priority. So lots of considerations. It feels like there's new ones every day. Just when we think we have something solved, I've seen a lot of questions about athletics. Tomorrow we have an athletics meeting with our middle school or high school, some of our administrators, because WIA continues to change things around or announce different schedules or different parameters. We're seeing professional sports teams impacted by this. So every step forward is a step to the side and then another step forward. We're trying not to make steps back, but certainly these are posing tremendous challenges as a public institution. But we recognize our importance in the community on Mercer Island, and making sure that we're taking care of the students first and foremost, and delivering the very best we can for an education for your children.
So just to finish up, if we could look at the last slide, this is our timeline. As you are aware, on July 24th, we sent out the messaging that we would be entering Red Learning for fall of 2020. We had a staff webinar similar to this on Tuesday. We have this community webinar today where I can see over 100 questions that we'll be culling through and trying to answer as best we can in our frequently asked questions portion of the website. Next week on August 6th, the school board will have a study session where we will go through the draft plan and have some more details fleshed out with it. The board must have a resolution to adopt the reopen plan. And so they would like to do a linkage session with the community. There'll be a special session on August 11th. That will be at 5 o'clock, just as the August 6th one will be. And then at their first regular meeting in August, which is August 13th, as an agenda item, the board will have the resolution for adopting the reopening plan. And then on the 19th, that is our submission date that we have to submit to OSPI our plan. The requirement is 2 weeks before school starts. So that was the date we used in our back planning. And I'm looking at the time, we're a little bit over, so let's just go to the last slide that says, thank you all so much for joining us. We appreciate all of your input and your thoughtfulness as you've been reaching out to us. Please, please, please tell everyone that we do have this information on our website. We've linked our existing website to a fall reopen one. We will have this presentation up there, as well as all the schedules and more information to come as we get more into details on this. So thank you all very much for being here with us tonight. Thanks to an awesome leadership team. Appreciate all of you. And go enjoy some sunshine as we have these long evenings, everyone. Thank you.